What's the most inappropriate thing a therapist has ever said to you? Mine once said I look like I enjoy aggressive sex. That I, quote, look like I like to get on top and ride them hard. Which is funny because after working with me for 6 months, he should have known that I'm a submissive. Like if I agree to an $80 copay, there's no way I'm taking charge in the bedroom.
I once had a therapist where when she found out that my sister was a school psychologist, she goes, "Why don't you just talk to your sister?" Okay.
When I was stressed out in a previous relationship, my therapist said I had 3 hall passes to do whatever I wanted to, including cheat on my girlfriend.
Storytime. About 10 years ago, I went to a psychiatrist because I had terribly unchecked ADHD. I couldn't get anywhere on time because I was always looking for my phone, my wallet, my keys, lather, rinse, repeat. After one session, the psychiatrist says, "You don't have ADHD, you're bipolar." "Oh, okay." And she gives me medication and says, "Take this immediately." Fast forward to 4 days later, I'm waking up sobbing. My then husband is like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just sad." I go back and tell said psychiatrist, "Hey, I'm sad all the time now," and she just tells me, "Ride the wave, it's going to be worth it." She then goes over to 2 file cabinets in her office, and she says, "Of these 2 file cabinets, 1 file cabinet full of my patients, I've prescribed the same medication I gave you." That was a red flag. I left her office and never took the medication again, and I still have no idea where my keys are most of the time.
The most inappropriate thing a therapist ever said to me was that I would be better off dead than trans.
So, the most inappropriate thing was not a therapist, it was a doctor. And I went to this doctor saying I need medication for PTSD and all this. And they turned around to me, because I'd expressed suicidal intent, and they turned around to me and said, "Well, Van Gogh killed himself, but at least he was remembered, so maybe take a leaf out of his book." Really? No.
What is the most unprofessional thing a doctor has ever said to you? So I had to start seeing a brand new doctor because I was having a bunch of issues with my skin. Turns out it was psoriasis, but we had no idea what was going on, so I got referred to this new doctor. He was an older man, and I was a little bit intimidated by him at first. So the appointment starts and he's asking me all kinds of questions, and then he asks to see the rash. And one of the issues I was having was in my armpit. So I was trying to show him like through my shirt, and it was kind of hard to show the whole thing. So I was like, "Oh, should I just take off my shirt?" And this man sits back in his chair and says, "Yes, excite me." What? I honestly didn't even know what to say at this point. I took off my shirt and I felt extremely uncomfortable. I had a lacy bralette on and this man is just like staring at me. Anyways, after the appointment, my mom ended up going back in and giving him shit.
Oh man, I've been holding on to this one for a while. So anyone who's seen my page before might know that I have a condition called complex regional pain syndrome. It's unfortunately very misunderstood and kind of rare. So I had an injury happen that then on top of the injury triggered my condition to flare up. And I know what happens when my condition flares up because it's one of the most painful and frustrating and debilitating experiences. I contacted my doctor and was like, "This is what's happening." She started freaking out and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm not in today, but there's a veteran doctor that's in that I'm going to refer you to instead. Come in today." I go in and there's this older guy, and immediately I try to tell him, "This is why I'm here." My doctor sent me, cuts me off, doesn't let me talk at all. I tell him about my condition. He laughs at me. Then he looks at my record and sees that I smoke occasionally. He tells me to hold out my hand. And I thought he was going to inspect me, so I held my hand out. He grabs my hand and then slaps it hard 3 times. And then tells me I'm a bad girl. And he sent me home without treatment.
So I've seen this a couple times and I finally decided that I'm going to answer. Sophomore year of college, I was roofied at a frat party. And luckily I was with a friend who was completely sober. Shout out Alana. And I was able to get home from the party just fine. Not an issue. Nothing happened to me besides being roofied, of course, which sucked. The next day I go to student health services because like I feel awful. I don't know what's happening. And the doctor tells me, you know, the half-life of most date rape drugs is really short. So I'm not going to find it in my system. Then follows that statement up with, boys like to play tricks like that sometimes. Bitch, I could have been raped. What the fuck?
Okay, boom. Back in 2018, I started getting like these random like stomach pains. Like just at random times, it felt like I got stabbed in my stomach. And then it would just go away. So I was like, cool, whatever. I kept working through it. One day, my boss literally made me leave work and go to urgent care. I go to urgent care and the doctor tells me that it's my fault because I told him that I use birth control to skip my cycle. And he said he never heard of anything like that before and it was my fault that I was in pain. Whatever, I left, you know. Next day, I go into work, I get the pain again, and I'm like crunched over, crying at work in front of customers. And they made me go again. Come to find out, I had an ovarian cyst. I should clarify that doctor performed no test on me. The second doctor was the one who discovered the cyst.
I always see people say, share the best thing your therapist has ever said to you. No, we're switching it up. Share the worst thing your therapist has ever said to you. Because I know there's some bad ones out there. Expose them. The first therapist I ever saw when I was in middle school, I was struggling with my faith and I was like, I think that I'm agnostic. And she just looked at me and said, that is really surprising. I would never expect that from you. As if I was like telling her something very taboo. I switched my therapist literally right after that meeting.
So I try to stay away from like the pretty personal stitches, but this story is just way too good to pass up. I was literally at one of my lowest of lows and the therapist that basically helped me like change my life around was no longer at that place. And this was like emergency therapy, whatever. So I was like, okay, whatever, like how bad could an emergency therapist be? So they got me in, I sat in the chair and she was like, okay, what's bothering you? I said, well, okay, these terrible things happened to me XYZ years ago. She said, wait, how many years ago was it? I said, oh, well, you know, my childhood and blah, blah, blah. So we're talking maybe like 6 years ago. Like that was like the last time. She goes, oh, that's over the time limit. We're not allowed to talk about it. You should be over it by now. I started laughing. I was like, okay, yeah, I can appreciate a therapist who like wants to joke about it. She's like, why are you laughing? I said, well, that's a joke, right? You had plenty of time to get over that trauma. It's already been 6 years.
So I'm a therapist and I can call out other bad therapists. I'll never forget when I went to therapy one day and all the therapist did was talk about himself. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to explain my problems and he's just going on and on about his life and every aspect of everything that he's ever done over the past few years. And I'm just like, I have all these issues that I want to get done talking about. Literally, I think out of the 45-minute session, I spent 5 minutes talking and he spent 40 minutes talking about himself. So if you have a therapist that spends more time talking about them, you have a bad therapist and it's time to look for somebody else. So I want to hear from you. Do you have any other bad therapist stories that you want to get off your chest? Let me know in the comments.
Craziest thing a male medical professional has told you as a woman.
So when I was 22, I went to the GI doctor because I was having debilitating heartburn that woke me up every night at 22, literally every night. And I went to the doctor and he said, there's nothing wrong with you. You just have acid reflux. And I said, but something's wrong with me. And he said, nothing's wrong. And I said, something's wrong. And he said, maybe if you lose 5 pounds, you won't have heartburn anymore. And then I said, okay, so you're not going to send me for blood work? And he said, fine, I'll send you for blood work. And then he called me back a week later and I had celiac disease. And I've had it for the last 4 years. So needless to say, I see a female doctor now.
This chain was made for me. I have so many bad doctor experiences. It's insane. But here's the worst. When I was 20, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, basically because the doctors couldn't figure out what else could possibly be wrong with me. A few months later, I realized I started becoming very out of breath doing everyday normal things. I couldn't do stairs. I almost passed out in the shower a few times, and my doctor was concerned. He sent me for a breathing test, which I failed, and did an echo of my heart, which came back abnormal. He sent me to a lung specialist who accused me of failing my breathing test on purpose because I was a teenager seeking attention. It was just stress and anxiety, and if he was my father, he would send me to therapy. I had stage 4 cancer, covering both of my lungs, all of my lymph nodes, my spleen, everywhere. And he told me therapy would fix it.
I really wonder what it's like to be a man and not feel threatened all of the time.
I accidentally made an appointment with a male doctor and I was having a lot of anxiety about it. While he was feeling my thyroid, he told me I could call him Daddy. The worst part is that my immediate thought is wondering what I did or said to make it seem like I was interested. This happened literally 2 hours ago and I feel dirty.
Stitch this and tell me something that a doctor told you that scarred you for life. I will go first. A couple years ago, several years ago actually, anytime my husband and I were intimate, it was painful for me. Tears, painful. And it took a couple months, but I went to the doctor and I told him about it. And this is what he told me on my life. He said, so at your age, it's normal. And it's a muscle. And if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Kind of like your husband. He'll find it somewhere else. So you just need to buckle down and pound through it. And remember, there is nothing sexy about crying through sex. So...
See, these are the types of things that really frustrate me. Remember when I told you guys that there are good and bad therapists? This is probably a bad one. It is not acceptable for your therapist to go through a drive-through in the middle of a video session. They should be giving you their undivided attention. And then we wonder why people have issues with going to therapy is because they have trash therapists who do stuff just like this. So if this is your therapist or if you had negative experience, please don't give up. There are great therapists out there that are willing to help you on a number of different ways. But this ain't it. This therapist has been canceled.